Democrats may vote on articles of impeachment as soon as next month to capitalize on momentum from their public hearings, but they still face big hurdles when it comes to drumming up public support for impeachment. Joining us here in Washington, Congressman Eric Swalwell, a top Democrat on both the House Intel and Judiciary Committees. And Congressman, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Chris.
So, as I discussed with Senator Kennedy, the Inspector General is expected to say when he releases his report in a couple of weeks that the original Trump-Russia investigation was legitimate, was not based on political bias, but he also is going to find that there was some serious misconduct. A low-level FBI lawyer apparently doctored some documents. There are new questions about the Steele dossier. Isn't that alarming?
No, and I reviewed most of this evidence on the Intelligence Committee, and we had concluded they had all the reason in the world to open this investigation. And this report shows that we want FBI agents, if they are told that any campaign is being reached out to by a foreign government or agents of that government, we want them to investigate this. Now, if a lawyer at the FBI acted improperly, that person should be held accountable.
And what do you think this says about the president still saying that this was an attempt to stop him and then to overthrow his presidency?
Well, it looks like the evidence is going to show otherwise. It's time for us to move on. But, to just respond to Senator Kennedy's remark earlier that maybe it was Russia, maybe it was Ukraine. No, not at all. It was Russia. And as a country, we have to make sure that we absolutely acknowledge it was Russia, condemn Russia for it, and it actually plays into Russia's hands if they have this equivalence with Ukraine where we're saying, well, maybe we don't know which one it was.
You're, as I pointed out, you don't end your role now because you're a member of both House Intel and House Judiciary. So what happens now? When does the Intelligence Committee issue its report? When will Judiciary start hearings? And do you expect Judiciary to hold open hearings and hear from fact witnesses, or just, for instance, talk to constitutional scholars about what impeachment means?
So Thursday was the last publicly scheduled hearing. We're still reviewing the evidence, to determine what, if anything, should be, done to the president for this misconduct. But I don't want to speak for the chairman, Chris, but it would go to Judiciary if we decided there needed to be a remedy. And, of course, the president, as we voted on, would have rights in the Judiciary Committee to be a part of that process.
Okay. Let's talk about his rights in the Judiciary Committee, because under the House resolution that was passed that authorizes this inquiry, the president does get to have a lawyer in the Judiciary Committee, and it even talks about him being able to cross-examine, being able to call his own witnesses. But there's an interesting article in that, and it says that if the White House continues to block witnesses from testifying, then the chairman, Jerry Nadler in this case, is well within his rights to shut down the White House lawyer. Even in the Clinton impeachment hearing, the president's lawyer, President Clinton's lawyer, got to question Ken Starr. Are you really saying that you may shut down the White House lawyer?
Well, the amount of obstruction here is unprecedented, and I think it was frustrating for the American people to watch, the last 2 weeks of hearings and hear the president and his defenders say, well, you don't have direct evidence, or all you have is hearsay evidence. You need to hear from XYZ person, when the president is telling Mick Mulvaney, John Bolton, Secretaries Pompeo and Perry not to come in. I think that can go to his consciousness of guilt, but I also don't think he should be rewarded and be able to play such a large part of the proceedings in the Judiciary Committee if they're not going to give us any of the documents. But that's Chairman Nadler's call.
But you just heard Senator Kennedy, and you've heard the Republicans for the last 2 weeks saying this is unfair. You haven't allowed us, in that case the Republicans, to call their own witnesses. Some yes, but some no. And now here's a chance finally for the president's lawyer to participate, and you're saying you may not allow that either.
Well, I'm saying it's unfair to prevent witnesses who are key witnesses from coming forward. That is monumentally unfair.
But wouldn't it be worse to shut down the White House lawyer?
And I don't know if that decision has been made yet. I'm just saying that we see that for this process to be productive for the American people, we need to have all of the documents. And if the president is going to say, I'm not giving you any of the documents, I'm not letting any of the relevant witnesses come in, however, I want to throw pot shots from the gallery and try and fog up this investigation, I don't know if that's productive either.
Democrats say that you have enough evidence to proceed and arguably write articles of impeachment, vote articles of impeachment. But you haven't heard. You could say it's not your fault that it's the White House, but you haven't heard from a number of top witnesses, including former National Security Advisor John Bolton, who is asking a court on December 10th, tell me, I've got an order from the White House not to testify. The House wants me to testify. You tell me what to do. The New York Times had an editorial this week, and I want to put it up on the screen. The New York Times editorial argued, no matter is more urgent than impeachment, but it should not be rushed for the protection of the nation's security and for the integrity of the presidency and for the future of the republic. So why not slow down? Why not wait to see what the judge decides on December 10th? Why not take some of these cases to court? Why are you in such a rush when you're going to be missing some of the most important evidence you could conceivably get?
Most importantly, the president invoked an upcoming election, and voters, in just a few months are going to be voting in the upcoming caucuses. And so there's an urgency to make sure the election and the ballot box, have integrity. And if he's asking a foreign government to interfere in an election, we are, on the clock to make sure that that election is protected. We want to hear from...
The election isn't until next November.
We know that the Iowa caucuses in February.
Well, but the president isn't going to be... I mean, the Democrats are running against each other. They're not running against Donald Trump.
But one of the candidates is who the president has asked a foreign government, to create misinformation on. So, we have to protect the integrity of those elections. But your question is a fair one. What we have seen, though, is the president, every time we've asked for documents or witnesses, blocks those documents and those witnesses. And this court process is a 9 to 12-month process. So we could lose everything that we value in our democracy waiting on the courts when we already have powerful firsthand accounts from the witnesses who have come forward. And Chris, as a former prosecutor, what I think is most remarkable here, I don't think in modern day history you have seen a bigger investigation that relies entirely on firsthand accounts. Most prosecutors today, to prove their cases, they put emails, text messages, financial documents.
But wait a minute, you talk about you talk about Watergate. You had John Dean, and but you had first-hand witnesses in the Oval Office. Yeah. John Dean, Haldeman, Ehrlichman, John Mitchell. You don't have any of that.
We don't have as many courageous men in the White House like them right now. But we do have a lot of the president's appointees who have come forward. People like Fiona Hill, people like Ambassador Sondland, Mr. Holmes, Marie.
Most of them never talk to the president. I'm just saying, why not? Here's the argument. You guys say that the president used his political powers for used his office for his political benefit in what he was asking Ukraine to do. Aren't you, in a sense, doing the same thing, using your power on one of the most important things, impeachment, for your political benefit, which is, well, we can't really wait. We got to get this before Iowa.
We have powerful evidence already. If the president thought these witnesses could clear him, he would allow them to come in. And I think what's more relevant than how long we should wait in the courts is the fact that the president won't let them come in. Innocent people would say, go cooperate with Congress. I did nothing wrong. Only a guilty person would block people like John Bolton and Mick Mulvaney from coming to Congress.
While you've been holding hours of hearing, public opinion has begun to actually move against you. And I want to put up a poll. Back in early October, people favored impeachment and removing the president by 52% to 46, or +6. Now, that's turned to 48% for removal and 50% against, or -2. That's an 8-point swing against removing the president while you've been making your best case.
Well, I saw an ABC News poll last week that said 70% of Americans thought what the president did was wrong.
But they didn't say impeach and remove.
A majority of people in that poll actually did favor removing the president. So I'm not focused on the polls. I know my colleagues aren't either. This president leveraged his power, his great, vast power, to ask a foreign government to help him cheat an election. And I don't think we should be looking at the polls to decide what we should do. I think most Americans recognize that is wrong, and there have to be consequences.
All right. I want to play something that you said this week. Here you are.
This is a crime spree in progress. We have what the president did with the Ukrainians in his shakedown scheme of asking them to investigate his opponent.
Congressman, the hardest evidence,
Thanks for only playing that part of the hardball interview.
Yes, that's true. People will have to go to the internet to find out what we're talking about. The hardest evidence that you've got is that the president conditioned a White House meeting, not military aid, a White House meeting on investigating the Bidens. When it comes to actually holding up military aid, all you've got are presumptions. You have nobody who directly says that's what happened. Does that rise to the level of what you called a crime spree? And more important, does it rise to the level of ousting, removing a duly elected president of the United States.
I'm not going to decide, ultimately on impeachment yet. We're still weighing the evidence, but it is worthy of our time. And actually, there's 3 different conditions. One, to just get the July 25 call. We learned in this last week's hearing that there was a condition that to get the call, the investigations had to happen. Ambassador Sondland said that. Then, to get the White House meeting, investigations had to happen. We have direct evidence of people saying, we talked to the president, we learned that. Circumstantially, we can prove the fact that the aid was withdrawn after the Department of Defense certified it on May 23rd. The aid was withdrawn for the Ukrainians, and everything we knew about the president when it related to Ukraine was conditioned. So July 25 call, White House meeting. So the fact that the aid was withdrawn, circumstantially,
and that rises to the level of potentially removing the President of the United States.
I should say, Mick Mulvaney in his press conference.
Okay, I'm not asking you to review the evidence. I'm asking, does that rise to the level?
Yeah, if it's proven, and I think we're we're getting pretty close to making a conclusion here. If proven, I don't think any president, Republican or Democrat, should be able to leverage their office to have another government cheat our elections.
Congressman Swalwell, thank you. Thanks for coming in today, and we'll obviously be following. You're a busy guy between your 2 committees. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.